the one thing we wanted actually to start with is it's always amusing to hear these glossy official office resumes, and what they seem to omit is always the kind of behind-the-scenes struggle to get started. And there seems to be, at least in our case, a kind of nomadic journey that takes place to find affordable and functional studio space, and that's probably a dilemma that most young firms face. And so we thought before we would get into a discussion of our work, we would actually start showing you a little bit of our journey and how we started and where we are right now, literally and physically. We actually started in an attic of a friend's house that we renovated kind of on the side while we were still employed somewhere else at night, and put electricity in there without ever pulling permits, and bought cheap doors and shelving systems, and just tried to kind of get a setup to be ready when the time would be right to get started. Bought salad bowls from Walgreens, hung them upside down as lamps, and really on the cheap. I think we
no insulation in the roof, so when the temperatures dropped in Milwaukee, we had 6 space heaters in the space that kept blowing the fuses in our friend's home, which didn't help our friendship very much.
And we were lucky enough to get pressed right away. Actually, we started, we quit our jobs, started out in the attic, and the same week, the architectural writer of the local newspaper wrote an article of us with a big photo of us, which was really great for our ego. And it appeared on the front page of the Metro section, so it was a pretty good spread. The problem was that that photo also triggered a chain of events that changed a little bit the direction that we were going.
First, we had somebody in the neighborhood who was obviously jealous that we were starting to do this, and called a few people, particularly a building inspector, as we were in code violation by having this 3rd floor attic occupied without a second means of egress.
And it also wasn't according to zoning. You weren't allowed to actually work in the attic.
So about after a week, we were notified it was time to start looking for a new space.
Which we did. And it was kind of interesting. That was really literally a week after we started, so that was weird.
So that first week, instead of working on projects and playing architect, we spent the time scouring the city looking for a new space, which we did find in the third ward of Milwaukee, which is an area occupied by artists, and it's an area slowly getting turned over by gentrification.
It was a cool space. It was in an old shoe factory, and we were just at the point where it was still affordable to actually get space there, a relatively large space for not a lot of money.
And what you might notice is that we conveniently designed the table and our lamps to actually work in multiple places. So the space was perfectly proportioned to be able to accommodate the long table.
Of course, Starbucks moved into that same area shortly after we did, which triggered a rent hike just a few, well, it was a year later. We had a 2-year lease, so it was okay, but it eventually required us to move again. And we ended up in a little 2-story former Schlitz tavern, Schlitz, the brewery from Milwaukee, owned by a person that knew us, and kind of an art patron that liked our work and tried to come up with a good deal so we would be able to afford this building. So we actually have the 2 stories, and that's the building we're in right now. We're working at the 2nd level, and we have a little gallery on the main level, which is helpful to just exhibit material and models and so on. And you will notice this nice sign here, and without being sophomoric, the theme of beer is kind of a reoccurring one throughout this lecture. So if you stay long enough, you will see. All right, it's hard for us to sit here and pretend that we have this waterproof and kind of completely thought out agenda, architectural agenda. And one thing you will notice is that all our buildings are extremely simple, and there are really 2 reasons for that. One is obviously we are a young firm, our commissions are small, the budgets are limited, and the size of the commissions is small. And the second reason is that there are a handful of architectural topics that we are interested in exploring, and just because the size and the budget of the projects is so limited, we have to make sure that the structures themselves are simple, so we have a little bit of wiggling room to explore the issues that we are interested in. Just to mention maybe the four most important, it's you know, we are interested in skin materiality, tectonics, and context or contextuality, and we don't really have a good answer, and these are all themes really explored by many architects before us, so we don't really want to pretend this is something that is earth-breaking, but we feel that we have to kind of get our feet wet in these issues and try them out on our own terms, with our own hands and with our own tools in the context we are working in, to move forward and evolve our work into something that becomes a genuine contribution to architecture. So what you will see is really work in progress, and you know, these themes that I just mentioned will reoccur throughout the projects at different scales and different intensity levels.
This next project is more of obviously a rural one here, and we'd like to actually walk a little bit more through the process we went through in developing the idea for the house. It's a relatively long site, 800 feet or so long, very heavily wooded. The last 200 feet of the lot actually dropped approximately 200 feet down to Green Lake, which is relatively in the middle of the state of Wisconsin. We spent a lot of time at this site, given that the clients didn't have an incredibly rapid pace to get this done. So we were able to really spend some time thinking about what we wanted to do here. And some of the first things we actually did were produce these just these study models, which were pure, for us, pure abstractions of elements of the site. This specific box here was just an abstraction of the verticality of the trees. As one's moving through this site, there's this constant shift as this winding road draws you to this essentially cliff that drops down to the lake. And here we were thinking or looking at the ways in which the verticality could react or interact with the body of a house.
I think one thing we should mention here right away is that it's always something very daunting about being asked to build a house in a natural environment like this, where you're the first person, first human being kind of, raping the landscape and putting a man-made structure in the middle of nowhere, really. And I think, the feeling of humility is quite strong when you are asked to do that. Of course, it's a very kind of sexy commission to do that, and you would never say no. But I think that the feeling to do something that was extremely respectful to the environment and something that would, hopefully disappear as much as possible, was, I think, one of the first ideas that led us to really spend time on the site and try to understand what we could do and what we could add to the site without making this big statement of something that you see from miles away as a house built by people.
And just approach it on the way up to this one specific lot. And this idea of a lake house is, in most people's minds, generates some sexy images of architecture, but the reality is that it was just really hideous ranch homes kind of approaching this area here. And the challenge for us was to be able to not only come up with the ideas for it, but then convince the client that doing these typical projects is really not what one should do in this specific property.
And again, I think one of the first things we noticed or that impressed us was the incredible verticality of the trees. So we built this shadow box, and there's actually a series of models we built that we were trying to use to translate in an abstract way these things that could perhaps inform us in terms of what the facade or the overall image of that building could become.
And from this actual model, we spent time then photographing and trying to almost not recreate, but think about the way one moves through the site. And I don't know how this is looking up here, but this shifting of the verticality of the trees to the body of the house was something that we were just very interested in. And as we developed the form, wanted to somehow have that dialogue intact. One of the other components, there's a verticality of the trunks, but then the unique fingerprint of each tree, which we found very enticing. And each one had its own kind of depth and kind of light and shadow components to it, and we wanted to somehow be able to abstract this again into how we develop the facades and the skins of the house, which all kind of forced its way out into one of these very crude initial models where we were trying to distill some of these ideas to their essence, and we make much nicer ones, but you know, sometimes you have to get through the rough ones to get to the root of the idea.
And I think the third component that was important for us was just the idea of color. It was just amazing for us to go back to the site throughout the year, and obviously the deciduous trees start changing their colors in the fall, and there's a long period of 3 or 4 months where this really happens very slowly but very dramatically too. And one idea of developing the facade was to use that mix of colors, you know, basically pixelate it, and then use that to inform us about some possible paneling that would, you know, reflect that color or that mix of colors throughout the seasons. And we built this model here, which was the kind of the first time we talked really clearly about this as a paneling system, where we used just leaves from the side, you know, laminated that on cardboard, and talked about the idea of using full-scale facade panels that again would reflect those colors from the side.
Which led to just, you know, material investigations, which was one of the materials featured on the building, kind of as it developed, was Prodema, which the idea with the house was that we had, which we'll show in later slides, was that we wanted to eventually disappear and have these kind of seasonal dynamics actually get expressed, and this product would allow us to do that by retaining its color over time with, you know, a finishing system that protected the wood from degrading under UV exposure.
This diagram shows basically the main components of the building. You see there's a very simple stick frame structure with or a mixture of stick frame and columns and beams. And then we have 3 layers of facade components that are all superimposed and create a very deep facade, literally deep in terms of the legibility of each layer when you look at it from the outside. The first layer is what Brian mentioned, that cedar layer, just untreated vertical cedar that will silver out over the years and become really more of the color of the trunks and the bark. And then you see the next layer, which is the series of Prodema wood veneer panels, the panels that don't change their use and just will always look vibrant and crisp. And then we have just glass layers, you know, literally just direct set windows with some operators in there that to provide light in the house.
And a little cleaner model here, but as we, you know, are working through this whole process, you know, we're developing, you know, both the construction ideas, and we'll make full-scale section models to actually look at these different layers, how the building all goes together, and this is just one of them here. And aside from the ideas, we're also incredibly anal with every single detail to the building, which gets us sometimes in trouble, obviously, when you're building in rural Wisconsin and needing to find builders that will actually flip through a 40 to 50 page drawing set rather than just improvising at every corner off of a 5-page builder set.
And maybe just a quick view at the plans. It's a very simple bar building. The building is tucked into the hillside, so when you come up on that drive that weaves through the forest, you kind of end up in this entry court, and you see the upper level of the house, which is really the main level, and has the kitchen and living and dining halls and a huge screen porch at the end in it. And then you go down, and there's a large retaining wall along the back spine of the building, and then there's the sleeping quarters down at the lower level. And just, you know, the garage is at one end, and there's the spine that penetrates that bar along the bluff. and becomes kind of an entry foyer that then terminates into an outdoor viewing platform that allows you to actually go beyond the perimeter of the building and look at the facade and look at the building, but then also look at the lake.
The organization of the house like this, one of the primary reasons was to, on the day-to-day living components, was to capture this dramatic experience when one actually entered onto the site and walked out to the edge, and then you're kind of sitting in this nosebleed seat looking down to the lake. And there was just something really extremely exciting about that, and to be able to actually live mostly up on that level rather than, you know, set the house further back from the bluff, or to rearrange the function so that the lower level actually opened up with the living spaces down there. So that's primarily the kind of upside down arrangement.
So that's the view that you have when you arrive in the entry court, and you have that view through the entry foyer out to that you know, viewing platform. And if you back, what you can see there is that those two concrete walls that penetrate the bar, and they form the side walls of that viewing platform.
The house posed some engineering challenges for us, just with the primary living space on the upper level being a completely uninterrupted space. And I don't know if we actually go back to.
We should mention that the building is based on a very strict structural grid of 48 inches on center, which is marked by exposed columns on the outside and then beams on the inside that relate obviously to each other. And I mentioned that concrete retaining wall on the lower level, that, you know, where the sleeping quarters are, and that wall is a highly textured surface with imprints on that 48-inch grid. And what you see in the slide is a model that shows the upper level articulation of the inside walls, which are clad in MDF that we just clear stain. And we thicken up the walls periodically to make room for closets and built-ins and shelving, which you can kind of see at the top there. And at the bottom you see a mock-up model of that textured concrete wall that you basically walk along as the circulation spine, off of which then all the rooms get access to. And the next slide shows that concrete wall built. You can see it kind of penetrates through the building, and on the outside it continues until it hits a rock outcropping that was existing there, and it creates a little, what we call a grotto, you know, an accessible terrace space out of one of the bedrooms.
This is actually the master bedroom on the lower level here, and it was a little tough sell for us at times with this exposed concrete wall for this particular client. They did have some art, and, you know, they had thought that this concrete wall would have been a really nice place just to hang all this art, and, you know, we needed to do something more with it to actually convince them that it should stay in the project rather than just become something else. And this whole developing this texture system, which related to the whole, you know, structural system and then textures of the exterior of the house, was finally what we developed to be able to actually convince them to move forward with this.
So that's a shot of the main living space, basically the upper level, which is the floor that has the kitchen, living hall, dining hall, and then the screen porch at the end. And you can see the structural system exposed. You see the glulam beams at the top, and then the MDF panels kind of filling in between windows and columns. And a view of the screen porch. The screen porch is actually connected to the main living hall with this foldable glass door system that you can retract entirely. So the screen porch at the end of the bar becomes kind of like almost the lung of the house. In the summer, they just open this all up, and it becomes, you know, basically air conditioned for the building. So they never actually need mechanical conditioning.